So this is a panel discussion about homeowners' experience with trying to upgrade their house or make it more energy efficient, or also, less impactful on the local environment. So we have a great set of houses to talk to you about today. And the way it's going to work is I'll give a little introduction about insulation, PV, just a really brief kind of high level discussion about PV, heat pumps, and ERVs. You'll find out what those are. And then we'll have each of the panel members talk about their house. And we've kind of decided that if you have questions, just ask it. The only dumb question is the one that's not asked. So, there's a lot of complicated technology out there, and it's often difficult to make sense out of it. So that's what we're trying to do, is help with that. My name is Mark Nimlos. I work at the National Renewable Energy Lab, but this is not my technical expertise. My technical expertise is biofuels, so this has nothing to do with what I know about. So everything that I've learned about by coming to forums like this, going on the home tour, talking to people who've done it, and looking at DOE websites. So I hope that gives you some confidence that this is stuff it's easy to figure out, and you just need to talk to the right people and get information from real users. Anyway, we have 4 houses we're going to talk about. I'll talk a little bit about ours, which has some PV. I won't talk about the PV. I'll talk about the insulation improvements we've done. The Nelson home, we'll talk about PV. They've done some really cool stuff with solar heat, and also passive solar or with heat pumps. And then the Stamp House is done a lot with passive solar and native plants. They've got a really cool yard with native plants growing in there. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And then the last one is done a lot with PV, batteries, air source heat, ERGs, and in a really tight envelope around the house. So let me start off by talking just briefly about insulation. And again, this is stuff that I learned by going to the DOE website, and there's DOE websites on all aspects of renewable energy, and often done presented in terms that the layman can understand. So it's really worthwhile, if you have questions, to look for things on the DOE website. So anyway, there's basically 3 different types of heat transport or heat movement in a house that they talk about: convection, conduction, and radiation. So convection is the movement of air. So like if you have a really loose house and air can move through the walls, that's convective heat loss, basically. And conductive heat loss is where you have conduction through the material of the wall. So if you have 2x4s or 2x6s that are, heat can pass actually through those 2x6s, and you can lose heat that way. So there's lots of things that people try to do to prevent that. And the way you'd solve the convection problem is by trying to cut down on the flow of heat and the flow of air. The way you solve the conduction problem is try to insulate things. So you try to insulate that 2x4 so that heat cannot transport through the wall. And then the final type of heat transport is radiation, which is infrared light, which you can't see, but comes from the heat around us, and that results in loss. So if you can reflect the heat so that it doesn't enter the house from the outside during the summer, and that it doesn't leave the house during the winter, then you can get it. You can be more efficient. So the other thing that happens when you make a really tight house, when you cut down on the conduction loss or the convection loss, you end up with a really tight house, and you have a possibility for poor indoor air quality. And so a lot of times with people, and you'll see this on the tour, and some folks have used this in their houses here. A a lot of times what you can do is put in what's called a energy recovery ventilator. And that's shown kind of schematically here on the lower left. And basically, cold air or hot air comes in from the outside and goes through a heat exchanger and either heats or cools the air that's coming in from the outside. So you can get continuous refreshment of the air, but without losing any heat or without losing any of the coolness in the house. And then everybody's trying to do solar PV these days. There's lots of incentives to do it. The payback is often fairly short, 6 to 10 years. And so a lot of people are really interested in this. So solar PV works is it has panels. A typical system consists of panels, mounting, and inverters. There's two different, the inverters take the electrical power that comes from the panels in DC and converts it to AC so that you can use it in your house, or so you can put it onto the sell it to the power company. There's two different types of inverters. There's what they call string inverters. So you have all the solar panels connected to one string inverter, or you have what are called micro inverters. We have an inverter on each panel. And I think probably nowadays the more common thing to do is the micro inverters. The problem with we have a string inverter on our system, and the problem with that is if you shade one panel, your trees grow and you start shading the panels, then you can lose power for the whole system. So typically people I think now are doing micro inverters. So one of the things that is like I've been a little alarmed about is the cost that people have been. I mean, there's a lot of people selling solar systems out there, and so it's really important to kind of have an idea of what these things cost, because sometimes they're charging way more money than they really should be. So a typical house, a solar system will cost somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. And like I said, the typical payback is between 6 and 10 years. So you should think about that. Again, you can look all this stuff up on the internet. What is the cost per kilowatt hour? Figure out how many kilowatts you need for your house, and then estimate what a reasonable cost system. And a typical system has somewhere between 15 and say 22 panels. Heat pumps are kind of a new thing, a new rage, and these are a way to replace old fossil-driven heating and cooling systems with more modern, higher efficiency systems. A heat pump is just a kind of like an air conditioner. It compresses air and then expands it. And if you want to heat the air in your house, use that compression cycle, which heats up the air, and then you go through a heat. You run a fluid over that, and go through a heat exchange in your house, and that heats your house. If you want to cool, you take the expansion part of the heat pump, and that's cooled, and then you can use that to cool your house. So it uses the same equipment to do both heating and cooling. And so there's a lot of interest in this, and so typical systems, are composed of a compressor that sits outside, much like an air conditioner does, a whole house air conditioner. That's where the compression takes place, and then the transfer fluid work goes into the house and goes through a heat exchanger. And there's different types of systems. You can have mini splits, which are little boxes that sit on the wall. You've probably seen those. And that you use for each individual house. But you can also have a heat exchanger that would basically replace a forced air furnace. So you take the furnace out, you put the heat exchanger in, you put the heat exchanger in there, and you can use the ducting and everything else that you have. So that's a little bit about heat. If you have more questions about heat pumps, I've got a bunch of slides we can talk more. Go ahead.
When, this isn't really a question, but the main reason why my brother and I, we used a heat pump in his garage salon is because we were able to use electricity alone.
Yeah.
Rather than having a gas
Right.
Furnace, forced air furnace.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people, when they're going toward electrification, they would choose a heat pump because they want to get rid of the natural gas if they can.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the idea is that you can replace, as Nancy said, you can replace fossil fuel burning stove or heater system with an electric driven heat pump.
Do you know what the average cost is for the heat pump?
So that's a great question. We had we have a house that we had a forced air furnace, and it was a pretty big house, maybe 3,000 square feet. We replaced the furnace with the forced air furnace with a heat pump, and it was about $15,000. So.
What about for I don't have vents in my house.
Yeah. So.
For individual rooms.
So for doing the individual mini splits, what you have is an outdoor compressor and then the mini splits, and it just depends about how many rooms you're going to run with that and how big you have to make the. It's hard to say, but you can expect the cost to be, somewhere between. It can go above $20,000 depending upon how many of those individual heads you have to have.
Or in my brother's case, in his salon, it was closer to $5,000
Yeah.
for a single unit
Right.
open space.
Yeah, for a single unit, you might pay, like she says, about 5,000. So it just depends how many heads you have around your house.
Let's not get into too much detail now. So this is the overview.
Right.
We need to hear from the homeowners.
Yeah. Well, we're going to answer the questions. So.
And then we'll answer the
Okay.
questions after each segment.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Did
Go
you
ahead.
consider the dual fuel system where you have a high efficiency furnace and then a heat pump that would that difference?
Can you repeat the question?
Did anybody, so we put the heat pump in your house?
Yeah.
Did you look at a dual fuel system where you get a high efficiency furnace and then have a heat pump that would replace like your essential AC unit, for example? And then the heat pump would feed into the ductwork and run when the furnace wasn't, when the furnace would kick on at a certain point.
No, we didn't really look at that. This was a pretty simple direct swap. It was pretty straightforward, and we got rid of our propane tank because of that. And propane's pretty expensive, so it's a pretty kind of a no-brainer for propane. For natural gas, it's a little
General
bit.
question for you, Mark?
Yeah.
On average, what is the total energy reduction when you move to a heat pump versus your fossil fuel?
I have some information on that. Maybe we can talk later after we give it. But it kind of depends on the efficiency of heat. It kind of depends on the temperature, and there's a variety of considerations. But usually, if you have propane, if you're using propane as a heat source, then it's much cheaper to use a heat pump. In our case,
Ballpark?
uh, hard to say. I have a table that has some information on that. Why don't we?
I'm seeing roughly 30% in my projects.
Okay. Yeah, I can believe that.
I like this other gentleman's comment here about the dual fuel situation.
Yeah.
So one of the things that can allow people to get the heat pumps into their homes much more affordably is design for the heat pump a much smaller heat pump, because the heating degree days across the season, it's only about 10% of the days are really those design days.
Right.
So when you can reduce the initial heat pump retrofit cost by going with a much smaller heat pump than
Right.
having a traditional fossil fuel fired appliance, unfortunately, but just to cover the 10% of the days, and you just have phenomenal carbon reduction.
Right.
It's not electrifying.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
We're talking about carbon reduction, right?
Yeah. So that's a good point. I mean, there are schemes to reduce carbon emission. And in our case, it was simpler just to get rid of take out the furnace, put in the, but every house is different. Ours was a simple replacement.
Another question too, and you may be getting to this, and if you are, just say so. Do you have a heat pump water heater?
Yes.
Okay, and do you like it? Have you had much success with it?
I'm sorry.
Have you had much success with
Yeah,
it?
it's worked great. Yeah. Okay. Our panels have, a lot of them have heat pumps, so they can talk a little bit about that in more detail. But it sounds like there's a lot of interest in heat pumps. Like I said, I have a bunch of slides we can talk about at the end, but let's kind of get through this. So sort of my advice on, these are often big purchases, can be super expensive. So my advice on this is, if you're interested in making some of these investments in your house, I would really look at the U.S. Department of Energy. They have a ton of details, and you can get as in-depth as you want. But also, like I said, they describe things in layman terms, so it's pretty easy to understand. You don't have to be a technical guru. I'd also encourage you to look at some non-profit sites like NECO, the organization that John and I are on the board for. There's another group called Go Electric, and that's right, Go Electric Colorado, and they have a lot of information about, what you can do, what the tax breaks are, and stuff like that. Another important thing is to attend the Green Homes Tour. You can actually talk to the people who've done this in their home and see what the details are, what the stuff looks like, and how it would fit in your house. I really encourage that. It's super important. And then I would also recommend, for big jobs, get multiple quotes and try to find, sort of Google search for sort of cost estimates for things, because you can find a lot of information on what a typical system might cost. So it's really important that, because believe it or not, there are unscrupulous people out there who are trying to make money off this. And so, be careful, because it can cost a lot of money if you're. And then finally, look up the average cost for the installation and stuff like that. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about is, there's a ton of rebates and tax credits and stuff. And so I've listed some of them here for some of the things that we're going to talk about, and for solar PV and heat pumps. And there's a board over there that has all this information. So if you want to look at that, I should mention that this was created last year, so there might be more recent information about some of these rebates and tax breaks. But do definitely check that out. That makes a huge impact. It can be 30% for your PV panels, or $7,000 for your heat pump. So they can be pretty substantial.
Mark, can you address, is it part of the Inflation Reduction Act, getting money out to states?
Yeah.
Colorado, I know, has applied for that money, but Colorado hasn't officially come out with a plan to distribute that money for these types of programs. Can you comment on that?
Well, so Colorado does have rebates that they offer for a lot of things. And the federal government also offers money that has come from the Inflation Reduction Act. So a lot of these rebates and tax breaks, you can see, are actually from that act. And I think Colorado's pretty forward-looking on getting these breaks out, and they also have a lot of breaks for low-income households. And so there's your regular tax breaks, but then there's also tax breaks and incentives for low-income houses. And as well, Xcel Energy offers, financial incentives to do some of these things. For instance, if you want to get a home energy audit, Xcel will pay for at least part of that. And sometimes.
That may have changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
They run out of some rebate money, I believe, for insulation, but I would check with.
What about the energy audit? Can you still get that through them?
You could still have an energy audit.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
I just had the energy audit done.
Okay.
You just did? Great. And they
Yeah.
covered it?
Yeah, that's a really great thing
It's a
to.
great thing.
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree.
So does that answer your question?
No, not quite. I was looking up, there's some math that I'll find.
Okay. All right.
Money hasn't got that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are things that are not fully funded. Anyway, what I'll do is talk a little bit about our house and the work that we've done on our house here in Golden. This is a picture of our house from 1989 when we first purchased it. The house was built in 71. We've done a number of things, including some additions to it, but we replaced the windows. They were single pane. We replaced them with dual pane, efficient windows. We added a swamp cooler. We added solar PV in 2014, and then had an energy audit in 2018, which I strongly, if you're interested in doing something to your house, strongly encourage you to look at that. It's a really great way, and I'll show you some examples. It's a really great way of finding where the leaks are in your house, where where things are not up to par. And then as a result of that energy audit, we improved our insulation, and then also by having dense or compact blown cellulose added to the walls, and then we wrapped the house in styrofoam and had stucco put on. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. One thing I should say is the really motivating factor for us doing this work on our house, on the siding, was that my wife found a rattlesnake in our house. So if rattlesnakes are getting in your house, you're losing energy, right? And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. We decided we had to do something after that. So we had snakes that, garter snakes that would make it in there, but a rattlesnake, that's a whole nother league. So anyway, we had an energy audit first, and this was subsidized by XL. They came in with a blower door, so sucked out the pressure in the house. This was done during January, and then went around with an IR camera and took pictures of the blue parts are where, like this is around a door, the blue parts are where air is flowing in, cold air is flowing in from the outside. I should mention that this house was built in the 70s, had 4-inch walls. Standard construction now is 6-inch. So plus I'd done some work on it, and I'd seen the insulation. The insulation inside was fiberglass batts, but that was mostly gone because they just kind of disintegrated over the years. And fiberglass doesn't last, or at least the stuff that was built back then doesn't last all that long. So we were with the energy audit, they found a lot of things that we needed to do. They found that there was a significant amount of air flowing out of the house, and they recommended that the walls be tightened up and that we have additional insulation put in the ceiling. We had some vaulted ceilings, and those were also not very thick, and so there wasn't a lot of insulation there. So what we did was we had this dense packed cellulose sprayed into the walls. And what they do is they go, in this case, since we knew we were going to replace the siding on the outside, they drilled holes into the wall and packed in the cellulose, and then pulled the battens. We had board and battens, so they pulled the battens off and then wrapped the whole house in styrofoam and stuccoed it. And so this kind of shows the process. The holes drilled in the wall, them spraying in the compact cellulose, and then adding the stucco on the end. So I don't know if there's any questions about that or anything. So the insulation was, so we did both our house and our garage. We had an attached garage, which was also 4-inch walls. And I think the total bill was about $12,000. But, yeah.
For insulation,
For-
and not for the siding?
Not for the siding.
How involved?
Yeah,
What
that,
was something like that?
that's pretty expensive. I don't remember the exact amount, but, maybe I try to put it out of my head.
What's the square footage of your house? How much insulation did you have on it?
So, like I said, we had additions put on the house, and the additions were done with 6-inch walls and standard modern construction, so that didn't need to be changed. But the old part of the house needed to be changed, and so there's 2 floors or 1 floor above ground, and that it's like 1,500 square feet or so. The ceilings, and they also did the vaulted ceilings, and that was a little more involved. They had to drill into the ceiling, put the dense packed cellulose in, and then refinish the ceiling. This was not too long. It took us, I think it only took like a week or so for them to do the insulation. The stucco took a bit longer, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They were pretty quick.
Really quick, we have a 1954 ranch right in front of here, and they came out and did the entire house in one day after Thanksgiving, so they were pretty quick.
Yeah.
So they drilled holes in the brick and then pumped the.
Oh, really?
And did the attic about 2 or 3 feet.
How did they?
That's about $8,000.
Oh, how did they replace the brick?
Mortar.
Oh, okay,
They were in there.
okay,
They colored mortar and then just there's a little hole at the top. They tried to get it in the sky
okay,
or below windows.
yeah.
So your vaulted ceiling, you just had cellulose plated, you didn't get any thicker with?
Yeah, so dense packed cellulose has a really high R value compared to regular fiberglass insulation, but also so it's got great insulating value. But the other thing about it is, in your walls, you don't want airflow. You don't want convection inside of the wall because you can have a cold spot and it'll cool down the whole wall. So the other nice thing about dense packed cellulose is it prevents airflow inside of the wall. So it not only is a good insulator, but it's also good sealer. I don't know it right offhand, but it's.
Basically advertises when they do it in a 2x4 wall, it's a 3.5-inch, that it changes the wall to be R14
Yeah,
from
that's
R9, so
right.
it's a gain of R5.
Yeah. And the foam insulation we put on the outside was about 4 per inch. So we added 8 plus 15, so it's about 25.
With dense pack, where's the vapor barrier layer at? If you've got humidity in the air, where's that?
Well, they don't do anything about that. They just spray in the cellulose.
If you've got environmental moisture,
Yeah.
how are you controlling that
I think
permeability into the dense pack?
I don't know.
It breathes.
Yeah.
It's semi-permeable, so you don't have a vapor issue.
Thanks. See, I said I wasn't an expert. All right, great. Let's get on to the next houses. Brent, you want to talk about your cool house? Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me okay? Cool. I'm Brent Nelson. Our house was built in '55, so it's a little older. It's brick on block. It's hard to insulate that, but if you want to know anything about insulation, talk to Steve because he probably has the most insulated house I've ever seen. So I think if you rub 2 sticks together in his house, it'll heat it. So yeah. So on this you can see we can you see that cursor on that thing? Yeah. So we have 2 types of photovoltaics: thin film photovoltaics and silicon photovoltaics. So that's kind of the standard active sunlight to electricity. We also have a solar hot water system that's really nice. It does our domestic hot water. And then we have a passive solar room here. This addition, there's PEX tubing we could do in for heating, but the passive solar that does it for us. We haven't needed to actively heat that space. So that's kind of the back of the house. We also have a swamp cooler. We put that in when we moved into the house in about 2000. And then we had the second Nissan Leaf in Colorado. So, or at least that's what the salesman told me. So that's kind of the back side of the house. Those are some of the things we did there. One of the things, so we kind of bumped this roof out and then we built this room. And one of the things I didn't think about was that actually shaded that big brick wall. That was all a big red brick wall on the south side. So we actually used the swamp cooler a lot less after we did this because we shaded that wall. The wall would get really hot in the summer. So I'd like to say I planned that, but that was just an unintended benefit of doing that work. So it's two different photovoltaic systems. So they have different kind of electronic properties. So we have to have two different inverters. They were both put in at the same time, but they have different properties. So we have to have two different inverters hooked up to our smart meter or net meter there. And then the whole solar hot water system, the sun hits the panels on the roof, and it's a propylene glycol system that heats a solar hot water tank, keeps that hot, and then that preheats the water going into our hot water heater. So that's really nice because, we get a lot of heating out of that. So the sun really heats water nicely, and it's stored in this tank here, and we just use it for domestic hot water. So that system works really well. Then the new thing, the reason we're on the solar tour of homes again is because people have seen the backyard. Now in the front yard, what we did is we had grass, so we drilled 3 holes. I'll show you in the next picture to put in a ground source heat pump. So we were talking about the air source heat pump and the compressor outside. This is the heat exchanges with the ground then. So it's always 40 to 50 degrees in the ground. And so that those big temperature swings on the heat exchanger with air, you don't see them because the ground's a more stable temperature. So there's 3 holes, 300 feet deep. Oh, one thing I did want to mention is we also put a solar tube in when we did that. So that actually snakes over from the north side over to the south side. It brings light into the kitchen. So they're really used nice for bringing light into places that you don't normally have light. And if you have a dark room and you can get a solar tube in there, it's amazing how much brighter it'll be. So those are really nice features. The fact that you can shape them around and get the light to where you need them is really nice. So they had to drill the holes. So that's a big operation. We made a little flyer up for the neighbors saying, hey, this is what to expect. This is what we're doing. Found a little video, YouTube, explained what a ground source heat pump was. And so they were prepared for it. What I wasn't prepared for is a whole bunch of trucks showed up. So we had a truck rodeo out front. So if you do ground source, be prepared for a lot of equipment, including this, I don't know if you can see that back there, but there's a water tank there. So when got water as they were drilling, they couldn't just dump it down the gutter. So they would actually put it in that truck and then truck it off to a pond where they would evaporate it off. So just to put it in perspective, that's the house size. That's 300 feet deep, 3 of them. So then the water pipes are hooked up and they go out of the house in one pipe and then they split and go into each of the holes in parallel and then return into the heat exchanger into the basically the furnace, right? They're below the frost line, so they're about 4 feet deep. Yep.
Did you price out air sources of water?
Yeah, it's way cheaper.
Okay. So I'm curious, what was it like?
It's about 10 grand a hole to drill these holes. Yeah. 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 So
And then running the pipes to the house as well.
that was part. Yeah, that was kind of included on that. Yeah. But you do this because you want to be efficient and you want to reduce you don't do this for economics. You do this because you want to save the planet, right? So, yeah.
What did you choose, vertical versus
A horizontal is really tough to do in a residential area, right? Because you need a lot of length. So you just, maybe if you're doing new construction, you can go around your house a couple times, but otherwise, it's really hard to do. If you're in a rural place, you could do, I would have done trenches, yeah.
Our soil content here in Colorado is not ideal from talking to Brian Fowler, Geosource, or talking with Dan Rao. It's more applicable, more higher moisture content. We've got a lot of sand. So the horizontal is not really a good fit for our soil.
Yeah, so anyhow, I'm going to say something that a lot of people would tell me I'm crazy, but at some point, if you want to save the planet, there's a word that used to be in our vernacular called sacrifice, right? We never use that word anymore, but okay, so I don't go to Madagascar and I put a geothermal heat pump system. So, that was literally the trade. My wife said, you want to take that trip or you want to put a geothermal heat pump system in? I said, well, on my deathbed, I'm not probably going to regret not going to Madagascar, but I'd regret not doing this. So, but the reality is for an individual, for individuals, maybe not yours personally, your biggest carbon footprint is air travel, right? It may not be in the whole energy portfolio for industry and commercial processes and agriculture and everything, but for an individual, if you're a world traveler, that's your biggest carbon footprint by far. So sacrifice that international trip and put in your heat pump.
Did you do an op-cost analysis to see what the payback period?
I don't care. I'm saving the planet. I did not. Okay. Otherwise, I would have done an air source heat pump. Then it'd probably pay back. Yeah. The air source heat pump. Now they've got I just saw an ad for one that works down to 30 below. So that's 5 years ago that was just insane thinking. So they're really good now. But the difference is, one difference is that you see the big heat exchangers outside the house. It's the ground, so you don't have the fans and the noise outside. It's completely silent. You still have the fan blowing air. You have the heating coil here, and you're extracting the heat from it here, and then you heat exchange it here. So the air comes in and blows into your house just like your furnace. So you still have your fan just like your furnace fan. So before we jump on that, I will mention that back to the swamp cooler, we use it primarily for heating, not cooling, because we have the swamp cooler. And so the fan on the heat pump is about the same size as the fan on the swamp cooler, but the compressor uses 5 to 10 times more electricity than the fan. So a swamp cooler is way more energy efficient than an air conditioner. You are using water, so if that's your concern, you use more water, but so we still use we haven't had a hot, humid day where the swamp cooler wouldn't work, where we would use the heat pump to cool with. So this year, but some years you get hot, humid days where the swamp cooler doesn't work, so then the heat pump would go into cooling mode. All right, I'm done.
The compressor you got in that page?
I'm sorry?
Sure, the compressor's in the basement, or is that outside?
It's in the basement, yeah.
How noisy you can hear it upstairs?
Well, it's not, because it's not any louder than my furnace, probably quieter than my furnace that I took out, yeah. So now if you had the big fan heat exchanger outside, that's louder for sure. But the unit in the house is,
I have the big fans outside, and they're very quiet.
are they quiet? Good, good.
There's two of them,
Okay, cool,
very quiet.
good, yeah. So that's good. They've come a long ways, right? Yeah.
Your heat is it, it's more heat? Or
No, it's forced air. It's just same thing. They just took the ductwork off the old furnace and put the heat pump furnace in, and
I got the same thing in mine, but I got an air conditioner with it too.
yeah, no, I have the air.
It's gone.
I have the air conditioner, but I don't reverse it just because I have the swamp cooler. But it could cool the house also. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to say
Yeah.
something for you. So this is our house, and it's on the south side of North Table Mountain in Golden.
Use the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? We're just gonna go back and forth. Don't hold it too close.
That's probably fine.
Hold it close enough.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now? Okay. So our house is on Garden Street on the south side of North Table Mountain. Mark's is also, so North Table Mountain is here, we're over here, and Mark's house is right around over here. So it's interesting because we're both on the mountain, so we have a similar environment, which I'll just drop this right now, but I'll talk about it later. It's a pretty intense environment. It's about 200 feet above this, 150 feet above the street.
100, yeah.
Okay, and the rest of the houses on Garden Street, which is a cul-de-sac, are on the street. So ours is the only one that you go up a hill to go to. So we get a pretty intense, very intense sun. The house has been built to maximize the solar panel, the effect of the sun, and we get a lot of wind and weather. So I just wanted to put that in, but I'm going to let Barry start out because he's an engineer and he has more technical knowledge than I do.
Yeah. So I'm Barry. This is Kathy, and the house was built in 2014. It is an entirely electrified house. We moved from a 1962 house over here in Applewood, five bedrooms. We raised our 3 kids, and we moved into this house, 954 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And we certainly felt that part of you could call it sacrifice if you want, but part of reducing our footprint, our carbon footprint, is reducing the size of the house, reducing the impact that the house has on the environment. And so we saw this house when it was for sale. We fell in love with it. Love the view. You can kind of see the view there, and so we've been living there since 2019. The house was built by an architect and his wife. His wife is an engineer at NREL, and he specializes in passive house design. And the house is situated very well in terms of its passive design. It's got a great orientation with regard to the sun. That orientation also has to do with the glazing. There's a lot of glazing on the southeast and southwest exposures. Very little glazing on the northern exposures of the house.
That means windows.
So your long axis is east-west?
Not entirely. It's the long axis is kind of southeast to northwest. So not entirely east-west longitudinal axis or axis, but again we're kind of on that southwesterly corner of North Table Mountain, and from a solar standpoint, we get hammered by the sun. I mean, our driveway doesn't need to be shoveled very often in the wintertime, and the snow melts off the solar panels very effectively. Even in the coldest days of the year, the sun will be able to melt the snow off the solar panels. We do have a PV system. It is 13 panels, 3.9 kW. It was installed by Buglet Solar, and it's got a central inverter. And so, Mark, I think you mentioned that the standard system is say 15 to 22 panels or so, and just because of the small size house, it was installed with a smaller PV panel system, and it is a net positive house. We get a check from Xcel Energy every month, so that's a benefit. It's about a $15 check, but so it's pretty minimal, but it's a check nonetheless. We do have an energy recovery ventilator, a little Zender unit. Zender is a company out of Europe, and that seems to work very well. It Kathy has some comments about some of the upkeep of that system a little bit later too. Our domestic water heater is a heat pump type water heater, and it is the only source of cooling for the house. We have no air conditioning other than what we get out of what's known as the closet cooler, the water heater that spills a little bit of cool air out into the home. So, but it is built into the side of the house, has a ton of thermal mass, and so that thermal stability is really what makes this house successful from a comfort standpoint. The only heating we have is we have some electric resistance cove heaters, and those will probably not come on until Thanksgiving, and they'll kick on for maybe an hour or two early in the morning. Even in the coldest days, they'll kick on for an hour or two, shut off, and the house will float and rely on the solar gain during the rest of the day. And so it's a very simple system, very simple house, and I think one of the lessons learned that we really have kind of glommed onto is to pay attention to how your house behaves. During the hottest days of the year, even without air conditioning or without a heat pump air conditioner, when it gets up to 100 degrees during the day, again, we're on a brutal southwest facing slope. It might get up to 78 inside if we treat the house correctly, and that's we open the windows during the night. Nighttime temperatures get down to say 65 or so, even in the hottest days of the year. That helps cool down the mass of the house. When the sun comes up, starts warming up, we close up the house, and that thermal mass carries the house through just wonderfully. So it's a pleasure to live there. So let's see.
What is the thermal mass?
The thermal concrete. Yeah. We have concrete floors, 6 inches thick, on top of a layer of insulation. We also have a concrete wall on the back side where we're built into the hillside, and so that adds to that thermal mass as well. Highlights. Again, we talked about the building orientation. It's got a great envelope. The roof is a SIP panel roof, SIP structurally insulated panel roof. It says R55. The walls are a 2x6 framed wall with continuous insulation on the outside, R39. We talked about the cove heaters. Talked about the heat pump water heater, the energy recovery ventilator, photovoltaic system. Covered all that. Yeah. This gives you a feel for the neighborhood here. This is our house here with the solar panels. We have a detached garage, and again, it kind of sits on a knoll here between Garden Street and Boyd Streets over here. If you're familiar with that part of the neighborhood.
You say hybrid heat pump water heater. It's just a heat pump water heater.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but we in the wintertime we will shut off the heat pump portion of it and run it on strictly electric resistance heat because we don't want to cool the house in the wintertime. Yeah, we do. Yeah, I just covered that. All of our mechanical and plumbing systems are shoved into a pretty small closet. Here's the heat pump water heater. It's happens to be a Ream model Proterra, and it was interesting. I went to a home tour a couple weeks ago up in Boulder. Toured about 8 homes. Everyone had that same water heater, which was weird. This is our heat recovery ventilator. Again, it's a Zender. It's called the Comfo Air 200 series. It's again smaller size heat recovery ventilator. simply because the house is small. We just don't have a lot of ventilation need. And then again, the PV inverter panel. And the property highlights, I think I'll turn that over to Kathy.
Can you hear me? Okay. So it really is part of the urban wildland interface, which I think is it Tim? No, I got it wrong. Mark. Mark is there too. I mean, we had a moose last summer on our property. We've had a lot of bears in the neighborhood, and not any elk yet, but wolves and coyotes and mountain lions around. So it's definitely deer, obviously. We have no irrigation system at all. When we moved into the house, I just said, we need to do native plants. I knew nothing about native plants, but I knew that this was a property that we needed to do that for. It already had a lot, and again, I didn't know much. And so what we did is, we don't have a picture of it, but when Rose and Travis had this house, the driveway went straight out to Garden Street, and there was this whole piece of property right here that was really unusable, and it had kind of a steep hill, and we wanted to soften this hill. So we had an old friend of ours who is a contractor come in and dump in a whole bunch of dirt to soften this hill out and put in a bunch of these boulders. Actually came from the dump. When the guy at the dump digs and digs, he takes these rocks. I said, Gary, he knows everybody in town, Gary does. You can take these, you just have to pay for the transport of them. So the neighbors who didn't know us weren't very happy with us at first, but we did this, and then we netted it all, and we native seeded it, and a lot of it we did. And so that's what we've done. We certainly water sometimes, like as I'm rehabbing, or we're rehabbing, and you'll see a little bit of that. I'll use the hoses to get, to water. It was very dry this year, but once these plants are established, I mean, you see them around, they get by pretty well. We don't use any herbicides or pesticides. It's not easy. It's easy enough for us because we have less than an acre. But I just didn't want to do that because I wanted the plants to be available to the pollinators and to the animals, and just have it be a safe place. And we have an incredible amount of pollinators that are there, birds and moths and bugs and everything else. And so it's pretty neat. We had a neighbor from our old Applewood home who put in a lighting system, and we wanted to be careful that it was not going to be too much light, because that's not good for the animals, as you all know. And so what do you say? How do you, not watts, but.
Well, yeah, just 12 watts
Said
for the entire system.
But it's great. It's just a few lights that get you up the hill, which is really nice for people that are coming up our driveway. Minimal impervious surfaces. We had these grates put in because the water it's still steep, and it was not this spring, but the spring before, when we had all that water. And our neighbor wasn't too happy with the fact that we were washing a lot of our driveway into the street. So Gary, again, he saved us, thought of this, and these are cement base, and there's 2 of them. And until he did that, we were putting in the trail. What do you call those things? Like you'd go up a trail and you'd see the swales, and that worked pretty well, but this is a much better solution. So anyway, that is something we've.
I have a question about.
What did I do?
Planting. Did you consider mitigation for wildfires? In your plan?
Yeah,
And
I did.
Doing stuff not quite so close to the house.
Well,
flammability of plants.
I didn't worry about it too much because we don't have a lot of trees next. As you saw, we don't have any trees next to our house. We have some gravel along the edges of the house, and maybe about 4 feet, and then the grasses start. And I haven't, really worried about it very much. Partly because the house has
Corrugated siding.
corrugated metal siding on it. And we're built into the hills. So I feel like, we could certainly have wildfire. We're actually 12 miles due south of Superior, where that whole area was just flattened. And so, yeah, we thought about it, but we haven't been too worried about it because of that. Oops, what do I keep doing there? Okay, so before I'm just going to say something before I talk about the native plants. So I love the simplicity of the systems in our house. And I can't say all the words. We've been on the tour a few times, and I've learned about, for example, the Zender, you've got your supply air and you've got your exhaust air, okay? And it's pretty simple. And it's great when you have a passive house, which is very tight. It's a tight house, right? And that's why it works so well. But what we learned this past year was something that I wanted to tell you about, because I don't think the word is really out there about this. And I don't mean to instill fear in you. It's more about the power of knowledge. And here's my example. When we lived in Applewood, we had a gas-fired boiler. Thank you. We had all of that stuff, okay? We were raising 3 kids. It was complete chaos, right? And doing laundry, and I was working I'm an retired attorney, just retired. He was an engineer. We were just going every which way. And so if something broke, then you fixed it, right? Hot water, something happened, you just, maybe once a year we'd have maintenance. It was not a big deal. Moving into this house, these are simple systems, but they are sophisticated systems, okay? You can't just ignore them and go on and be like, oh, cool, we got this, new, HRV, and we're just gonna, okay, it's doing its thing, we can ignore it. And maybe you all aren't like that. Well, this is me, and I think I'm not that different than a lot of people in the sense of, like, we didn't have a spreadsheet of maintenance. Now, I think you would, John. He has that. That is not me. We do have one now. We have a spreadsheet, because here's what happened to me. I had a bike fall. I do a lot of bike riding, and I had fractured something in my obturator ring. So I found out I had some osteoporosis. And so I didn't want to take any medication. I went to the naturopath. I had some tests done that you would normally get done. And they test for toxins, triple toxin test. Guess what came up? Mycotoxins, mold, circulating in my blood. I felt fine, right? Nothing. I would have never have known this. Well, bottom line, what happened is, after we went through all these steps with, all the tests and everything else, it was coming from the Zender HRV. That was the source, the main source of the mold, okay? How dry is this climate? Mold? Are you kidding me? We don't live in Southeast United States, right? I grew up in Illinois. I was just there, and I'm like, this is where the mold is, right? But not here. Well, here's the deal. If you get moisture that's trapped in there, and we were changing, there's 2 filters, right? There's an intake filter in the Zender. There's a exhaust filter. And those filters need to be cleaned. You also need to vacuum the top part of it or something, right? And there are little screens on the outside of the house for the intake and the outflow. They're little screens like this. We had never looked at those. They were blocked up with, we're in this dusty, windy environment, okay? Those were blocked up, and so we don't know what the source of it was. But I think it was moisture that got into the Zender, and we weren't doing our annual maintenance. You're supposed to call Zender out. It's not expensive. We weren't doing our regular maintenance probably regularly enough. We sat down and guess what we did? We read the manual. It was so illuminating to read the manual. I'm like, wow, we can do this. So Barry, the expert on spreadsheets, we've got this kicker spreadsheet now. Every single system in the house. And it's hanging in the utility room. I take it down every month. We look at it and we go, okay, what do we need to do? It takes you like 20 minutes, right? So anyway, what we had to do is we had this whole thing that happened last December, that we had this wonderful contractor. We had this great guy at Zender, what was his name? He got sick of talking to us, but he was so nice because what he said, I'll have Mike, the contractor, we're going to take out all the ductwork in your little house, and we're going to take out the Zender and we'll try to clean it. We'll take it back to Berthoud, try to clean it. If we can't clean it, you're going to have to buy a new one. Well, he was able to clean it, okay? I had the mold guy who came in and, have you ever heard of this? Contained the whole space. We had to move everything out and all of that. But they did a great job. They added new ductwork, and the benefit of that was we got the state-of-the-art ductwork now in the house, and we have rigid ductwork in the closet, which they thought was better. We also added a pre-filter. There's a pre-filter, so now we have 3 because we thought, well, that's maybe where the problem is for us. So now we're changing the filters. We're doing everything we're supposed to, and we have this basically a new system. But I just wanted to say that, and I didn't want to take up too much time, to let you know that they are easy to take care of. But, you know, you guys are probably the crowd that all like read and reread the manuals. But I'm sure that, can anybody raise their hand if they're like me? No, you aren't in here. Thank you. So I learned a huge lesson. I will never do that again. Now I'm the keeper of the spreadsheet. Okay, yes. So there you go. So this I made with does anybody know Tom Schweitz in Golden? Okay, Tom is a good friend of mine. He's about 10 years older than I am, and he is a botanist. And he's literally recorded so many species of plants, not only in Colorado, but all over the country, and he's nationally known. And I met him, he lives 5 minutes from me, and we both are volunteers for the first organic park in Golden, which is DeLong Park, if you know where that is. So we work on that. He has helped me. He has recorded every species of plants on my property. It's available online. I should say our property. And these were just some examples. We did a presentation last June. And these are about 27 of maybe at least 100 or more species that we have. And one of the things we did was, this shows it, and there's something here. There were 2 areas on our property, and it's on we have a steep hill next to the house. You can't tell how steep it is. You saw it in the other picture. But one was where Rose and Travis disturbed the ground to put in the sewer and the water. So we had so many just cheat grass and smooth brome, all kinds of weeds and invasives. And then this gabion wall they were forced to put in because they literally had to create a pad for this little house because it was so, and they dug into that hill, so that very steep gabion wall. And on the one end, it's so steep, nothing grows there. So Barry created these ladders made out of timber, just dead timber. We went over on Tucker Gulch and just grabbed this timber, cut it up, and the ladders sit on the slope so that I'm about to plant this area so that we can get stuff to grow in there. And I already have things growing in there. And so it's very exciting. A lot of these things were there, and I've planted other things. But why I wanted to include this slide, or I should say it was Barry's idea, is because wherever you decide you're either going to remodel your house, like Ben did, or Mark did, or you're going to buy something like this or build it, you need to think about the sustainability of what's around you too, right? Because you're wanting to be sustainable, not just about the systems and the energy use, I think, but also about the earth. And the plants and the animals can't speak for themselves, but you can speak for them. So I could go on about that, but that's why I wanted to put it in here. And so there you go. Thank you.
And actually, our water bill now is about 2,000 gallons a month. Our water bill in Applewood was, especially during the hotter part of the summer, was closer to 30,000 gallons a month. So a massive reduction in water consumption. Great, thanks.
Okay.
How's that? Works. So after hearing all this, these great things that have been done, I feel like we took maybe kind of a cheating course. This is a new build, so so it's designed to be energy efficient from the ground up. We just moved in. Some of you may have visited the house. It was on the tour last year. Some folks may have visited the house last year. That was actually before we moved in, so we moved in the middle of November and been living there since. So I just thought I'd go over kind of the high level of the considerations that went into this thing, since they started with a blank sheet of paper and it was always going to be a very efficient home. So one of the first things that went into this that I was totally ignorant of until the engineers and architects got me going was this idea of AeroSeal, which is really cool. So they frame the house out, they get the envelope established, but before they put the insulation in place, they seal up all of the intended exits from the house, the drains and all those good things, and they blow in under pressure this material it's aerosolized in the air, and it finds all of the cracks as the air goes out the cracks. These little aerosol particles get stuck in the cracks and fill them up, and so it's a really tight envelope. And then there's a lot of insulation. So in the ceiling, in the roof up here, there's a total of 14 inches. There's no attic at all, but there's 14 inches. It starts with spray foam at the top, and then batting is used to make sure there's no air gaps. You can see here on the wall, there's a little bit of the window. Some of the spray foam in one small space that's just all foam, but the rest of it is foam plus batting. So it's extremely tight. And we have air conditioning available in the house. I think we ran it outside of the master bedroom. I think we ran cooling maybe 3 days this year. So it is so great to be able to just use open it, just as the stamps we're talking about, open the windows at night, close them when it starts to warm up during the day. One of the things about having it so tight, though, is the need for that ERV. And here's a picture of the actual ERV that's in our home. This old house has a great video for you to understand what goes on. But this is actually, this cube here in the center is a whole bunch of straws that go at right angles to one another. And the air comes in, the air coming in and the air going out pass each other in all those tiny little straws and exchange the heat. And the video that they do, you can watch online, is really great because they actually sit there with, it's like red and blue smoke sticks. And you can see it's both going into the same box and they're coming out without mixing. It's amazing. It's really cool. The other thing about the walls is, in addition to the 2x6 framing here, there's exterior foam insulation with instead of just the OSB on the outside, and that really helps to increase the R value. So we're in the mid 30s on the walls, and I think we're close to 70 in the roof. So it's really tight. And those cool. This one sounds like it's maybe a little bit easier to maintain than stamps. There's actually these are the two filters, and I pull those out once a month and wash them, and they work just fine.
Do you have a spreadsheet?
I don't, but I do have.
How are you still alive?
But I do have my own automation. I have a an automated appointment on my electronic calendar that pops up every other weekend and says, okay, it's Sunday, you have these 6 chores to do, and I just go around and do those, and it doesn't take very long. And then the house is built with very efficient systems. Of course, all the appliances are, are energy saving, and the lighting is all LED and great stuff. That's probably the same. I was too far away to see if this is the same hot water heater you were pointing at, but it's another Rheem heat pump hot water heater. Now this one we don't use for cooling. It actually vents, no basement. We have a crawl space, so it actually keeps the crawl space cool. It vents down into the crawl space. So it's always on heat pump mode. And it has been really, really good for us. It's, I think it takes like 3 or 4 kilowatt hours a day to do the thing. And yes, ma'am.
Do you need to run the mini splits very often for cooling in your well-insulated house?
No, I don't. So that's what I was mentioning earlier. The cooling for the main part of the house doesn't get run hardly at all. Didn't, at least this summer it didn't. However, in the master bedroom, one of the nice things about the way this is configured, and I'll go into more details in just a moment, is there's 5 different zones. And so I can go into, before bedtime, go into the master bedroom, turn on the mini split and drop it down. We have this thing in our house. There's a difference in opinion on what the temperature should be. And the wife wins, so it will be in the 60s at night.
So you sneak in there?
Oh, I am tasked to go in there and do it, to cool the place. Excuse me, sir?
Have you considered radiant cooling?
No.
Your air to water and the tube already in the floor, and just controlling the dew point?
No. The engineer did not advise that. I don't know all the technical details why that was. The air source heat pump is one of those more modern ones, so it is very efficient. The engineer actually considered and had a bunch of cool numbers about why it wasn't really cost effective to do the ground source. Not only was it just the cost of the whole, but this doesn't have to run. This runs most of the time. We don't have to use the backup very often. The way that system works is it's kind of fun. This is the mechanical room. The heat pump on the outside here keeps this reservoir either filled with cool water or hot water. And then in the winter, the system is pumping into the heating zones in the floor, and there's 7 different heating zones, thermostats around the house that drive the way that works. And that's a lot of fun because it's really a very simple system.
Do you know your average supply water temperature? Floors?
Into the floors. It's we keep the target temperature for the winter in the reservoir is 120.
Nice.
Yeah. And in the summer it's 50. But it doesn't get run too often, as I said, in the summer. So all the sources down here now, when we do get those ultra cold days and the heat pump is not sourcing enough heat, there is a backup boiler here that will kick in to keep the heat up in the reservoir if necessary. And then in the summer, there's 2 little switches over here, and all of a sudden, cool water shows up in the reservoir, and these pipes going up to the mini splits around the house get their source.
So is your house just one level on a slab? Is that
It's one level on a crawl space.
okay? So you just get pretty neat before
Yeah.
yeah. So what do you have mini splits in addition to that? parts of the house that I couldn't keep warm.
The decision was taken that it wasn't a good idea to use, and I've heard bad things about using cooling in the floor because it causes condensation and stuff. I don't know all the technical reasons, but they said no, do this instead.
So, okay, so you have heating in the floor and mini splits, correct?
Yeah, and then the mini splits are active in the summer for cooling,
Gotcha.
and then this floor is active in the winter. Sir.
So you have these 5 fan coil units, kind of like what you'd have in a typical mini split, but instead of refrigeration, like, generic term would be Freon, but they don't use that anymore. But instead of Freon, is it actually cold water?
Yeah, that's the mini splits are sourced from cold water.
Because you have an insulated house?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure that the question is, does that only work because it's a well-insulated house? And I think that we could get a lot of cooling out of those units if we, size if it wasn't as well insulated, if we sized the heat pump to do it, it would still work, I think. I mean, all it's doing is, it's just a heat exchange by blowing the air over the cool water.
The outdoor air water heat pump supplies 50-degree water to the tank during the summer.
Yeah.
And then you have fan coil units that are sending cool water to the fan coil units. So they're not actually refrigerant-based mini splits. They're just cool water.
Yeah, cooled water. Yeah.
The reason I was asking is because like the cold water is 50, whereas a refrigerant would be about 40 degrees.
Yeah, and we could cool down if I had any trouble with that, I could cool it down to 40. I mean, I'd pull up the app on your phone and just change it. It's one of the things about the new house and all the new appliances and stuff. Everything has to have an app. So as a matter of fact, it's a great story. We had been in the house 10 days. We were about to leave to go visit family. Had to drive for 10 hours to visit family. Or no, it was 20 hours to visit family. And we got up the morning we were supposed to leave, and the morning before we were supposed to leave, and the floors weren't getting warm, and the house was cooling off. And we didn't quite know what to do. And so we called up the installer, and he and the engineer got together and thought about it and looked at all the different parameters and stuff and said, you need a software update. And sure enough, we called the company in Canada, gave them access to our system, they installed the software update, and it hasn't had an issue since. It's like, oh baby. I do software for a living, so relying on this stuff doesn't make me happy. We also have solar with a battery. So 10 kilowatt solar panels, 10 kilowatt battery. We've been living with that since mid-May. It's awesome. You can see here is a little graph of where the green line is what we're producing and the red line is what we're consuming. So we're doing good in our quest for net zero. I did this earlier in the month, so it's not much of September in this graph. But I'm going to be excited to see what it looks like in December. We'll see how the year on total balances out. Ma'am?
How many square feet is that?
About 1850 heated. There's a enclosed patio and an oversized garage, but that doesn't count those. Sir?
More of a generic question for a air source heat exchange or heat source. You have a north-south facing home, so it may be a lot cooler on your side than your south side. Is there a rule of thumb or recommendation where to put that air source heat pump on the north side or south side?
Well, see, this is my out for. He'll answer that question here in a second. But this is my out is that I didn't have to understand all the details and design it right, because
I think the outdoor unit's more about the direction of the wind into the fan, so you don't have the wind fighting the fan, so you're moving more of that, because you're trying to move the heat from the air into the coils inside that outdoor unit, so you don't want to have the wind fighting the fan. And then the other siting considerations are you in an alcove where the wind, the air is going to get trapped? Is the unit going to get covered in snow, so you need to get it up on a platform, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one thing that I was wondering about when they first installed it. You can see the heat pump is actually on a 2.5 foot platform just to make sure it never gets into the snow. And this is sited on the south side for.
Depends on where you are, but it does get into the snow.
Well, that's true. That's true. Okay. We also decided to enroll in the in Excel's Battery Connect program, which I think is kind of cool. So y'all are familiar with the idea that when, even without a battery, when the sun shines, you're producing more than you use, that goes into the grid. And then at night, you draw from the grid. Well, with this Battery Connect program, what happens is you give Excel permission to draw down your battery on the biggest cooling days. So when they have these big peaks of generation demand, they can actually reach in and take 60% of our battery from us during those times. And we get a small kickback for that. But thought it was pretty cool just to have, the ability to have on-demand storage for the larger grid distributed around a big area. I think it'd be a kind of a...
It keeps updating.
Oh, it keeps updating?
For those coming in, because mine is different than yours.
Oh, it is?
I ran in April, and suddenly I got a check for $5,700. And I'm not really sure when and I just got to notice that it's changing again.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah. So there might be more than a nominal.
But I know I'm getting a hell of a lot back to them, much more than I'm using.
Yeah.
Except when I charge the car.
All right.
So that metering, what is Excel doing that metering right now? Is it 1-to-1 or half?
Well, so there's two options when we signed up, which may have changed yet again, but last I heard it was still that way. You have two options. Either you accumulate credits, so we're under time of day billing, right? So you accumulate credits for standard, mid, and high peaks, right? That's the program we're under. So when we draw back from the grid, then we don't pay for what we've already sent into the grid. So we don't. And then there is another program where you can actually get paid for stuff, but the amount is so trivial, I wouldn't recommend it.
So you actually have an electric charger?
An electric.
Charge you anything for electricity?
They have not gotten around to actually updating their billing system for us yet. So all our credits haven't applied yet. So I'm still paying like $35 or $40 a month for electricity.
I don't have an electric bill at all. I mean, it's just, all I have is my $14 a month for gas. Because I'm still attached to gas.
Ah, okay.
Because I have a grill I don't use.
That's great. But I thought that was a pretty cool program that they could come and tap things. So a little bit about the context, why we did this. So Jane and I are kind of newlyweds. We're 6th anniversary in a couple of weeks. We started the process right after we got married. So it's taken us this long to get all the way through it. 2.5 years of that is Jefferson County paperwork that should not have been an issue, but that's another story for another day and several adult beverages. So Jane's been into living sustainably. She's LEED certified and Vision certified, which is kind of the infrastructure version of LEED. She's a consultant, works for an engineering sort of consulting company. I really like the idea of living sustainably and doing the best we can to reduce our carbon footprint. But I also look at this less as sacrifice and more as a cost-saving annuity. I know I'm going to get down to a minimal charge and not have to worry about that stuff. About the cost of electricity in the future as it bounces around and goes up and down. I know that I have battery backup. We've been seeing a lot of interesting power shutdowns and other weird things happening both here and broader around the country, so we don't have to worry about that. And a lot of the features and everything, I hope are going to allow us, since we're getting older, to just stay at home longer. We really don't want to be, having to look at relocating. Hopefully they'll take me out on a slab. Another thing that really came up for us is this idea of marital harmony and heating and cooling zones. So if you come into my office, the temperature will be decidedly warmer than if you go into the refrigerator in Jane's office. And then I threw in, I don't know, Mark, are these slides going to be available for folks to download or something? Or?
It's up to you guys.
That would be so great.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just thought I listed out some of the details about the actual equipment involved. There's a link to aeroseal.com, which is, I think they're competitors to that. That might be the AeroSeal, might be the Kleenex of the sealing world, right? And then the team that we worked with, so Ewers Architecture and BrightSense, who did the mechanical design, Sovco, Eric there did the install, DT built the thing, and of course Buglet, who is those guys are the golden solar folks, I tell you. They got it down.
Point of information.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
know where the name Buglet comes from?
Yeah.
Yes, she does.
He was
Yeah.
half a Buglet. When she was a kid, she was so cute.
Yeah.
She was called Cute as a Bug, Buglet.
Ah,
The name.
very cool. Ma'am.
You don't have to tell me your address, but what part of Golden do you live in?
We live in West Pleasant View.
Where?
West Pleasant View?
Oh, okay, great.
Sir.
Instead of, you had spray foam and bats. Any reason you didn't just go just all spray foam?
Just cost. I mean, we got to pretty serious insulation without going to, I mean, if we had done in the roof, if we'd done 14 inches of spray foam, that would have been a lot of money. That would have been serious dollars. So we got several inches of foam and then the batting to fill in the rest of the gaps. Ma'am.
There is one thing that nobody's really said about the forced air heat pumps. You have the gas forced air that you're going through your vents, and it comes out at god awful 120 miles an hour, and it's 120 degrees, and it blows air until it gets warm enough, and then it shuts off until it gets cold, and then it warms up again. With the heat pumps, they just replaced my furnace for a heat pump. It's a breeze. You don't get that blowing air. It's just a breeze that comes out.
Yeah.
And it comes out much longer. It keeps the air much more steady. The same temperature, much more steady. And it actually feels cold because it doesn't blow at 120 degrees. It blows at 80 degrees. And that's cold compared
Yeah.
to body is 98 degrees.
Well, don't get me started. I'll start talking about heated floors, which is just my.
I've always had heated floors.
Yeah, that's just heaven. The only actual there are, I think, 6 little hockey pucks around in different in the bedrooms and different places around the house where the ERV puts out a very tiny breeze to keep fresh air circulating in the house. Otherwise, there's
It's just it's
yeah, but it yeah,
forced air.
it is.
Then the gas forced air. It's quiet.
Great, well, thanks, Mike. Thanks the panel.